Good afternoon and welcome to Hoosier Storytellers, a program for and about the people of Frankfort, Clinton County, and Central Indiana. I'm your host, Mike Clossin. I'm the outreach librarian here at the Frankfort Community Public Library. And today we'll be discussing the Frankfort Hot Dog Hall of Fame. Thanks to Daniel up in the booth, we are being streamed on YouTube right now, and you will find the recorded versions shortly afterwards on the library website. Just enter myfcpl.org in your search engine to get to the website. Click e-resources and Hoosier Storytellers. Today we'll hear about the creation of the Hot Dog Hall of Fame from Hall of Fame Board President Don Rusk. Craig Mundell will fill us in on the successful Hot Dog Alumni golf outing and Hall of Fame reception that was held yesterday at the Frankfort Commons golf course. And then we're going to hear a little bit about the lives and achievements of two new inductees into the Hall of Fame, veteran fighter pilot Travis Kelley and Jodi Skiles Commins, a pediatric oncologist at Riley Hospital for Children. For those of you who are on a tight hot dog weekend schedule, our program will last about an hour this afternoon. If you have any questions for any of our guests, we'll have some time for that at the end, and I'll remind you later. But if you have a question for our guests, we need you to get a microphone so you'll be heard on the live stream. And the way you get a microphone is to raise your hand, and Microphone Mindy will come flying through the aisles at speeds approaching Mach 1.6 to bring you a microphone. I put that in there for you. So, welcome to Hoosier Storytellers, Don, Craig, Travis, and Jodi. I do all the hard stuff. I'm going to start with Don. And Don, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about how long has the Hot Dog Hall of Fame been around, and how did it originate?
The conversation started in 2017. There was a group of people that Don Stock, who had been chair, put together and started talking, and it was initially kind of had a thought of being a sports Hall of Fame. But the more we talked and the more we visited with people and got some insight, we realized that we had far more exciting people to be mentioned and recognized than just some sports people. Now, we have obviously put some sports people in the Hall of Fame, but it's amazing the people that have graduated from Frankfort and their accomplishments.
I wanted to talk just for a minute about the plaques that are on the wall. A lot of people may not know about those, even people that go to the ceremony, if they just come in the front door and go to the cafeteria. So could you, and I know that the plaques were redone recently and they've been rehung, so maybe you could talk about that.
As you go through the main entrance now and the hallway down towards the auditorium there, on the left and right-hand side both, you'll find, and something I was going to mention, 54 plaques that have been placed through 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. We've had 54 nominations and recognized. And those are on both sides of the wall across from the auditorium. And this evening, when you come to the ceremony, you'll turn left and head down to the cafeteria, and that's where our ceremony will take place this afternoon.
And I think they were placed there for a specific reason.
Basically, what our goal there was, we wanted the students at the high school to walk down the hallways and be able to look up and go, I didn't know that person, or I didn't know this person accomplished that, because like I said, there's some awfully great accomplishments, and we're awfully proud of those people and their accomplishments, and we like the students to go down the hallway and look up and be able to go, they did that, I can do that. Frankfort did that for them. Frankfort can do that for students today. And we think that's really important. We actually caught ourselves. We were putting the plaques up on a little side, Mike, and we were putting the bios on the plaques. And after a year or two, we started looking, and I don't know, maybe we got too old, but we're going, I can't read that plaque. So we went through a process of redoing the plaques and reducing the bios and tried to hit the high spots and keeping them to about 50 words so that they're legible from somebody walking past without a microphone, using a microphone or microscope to key in on the words. So that was part of the redoing, but they're there and they're for the students to see and maybe inspire them.
Did you say what time the actual ceremony was today? And tell us about that. You may have mentioned it.
I didn't. It's at 4 o'clock this afternoon in the high school cafeteria, obviously out on Mash Road. And it will last an hour and a half, thereabouts. But we will recognize our recipients for this year, and there'll be some recipients that have come back, and we'll recognize those people as well.
Can you talk for a minute? I know we have 2 inductees here. Can you talk a little bit about who else is going to be inducted today?
And I'm going to use my notes. Mike's got his clipboard. I'm not that fancy, but we have a total of 8 recipients going in this year. 2 of them are posthumous awards. One is Kurt Day, a 1935 graduate and 3-time world champion horseshoe pitcher, which is any world champion in our books is quite an accomplishment. Tom Roball is the other posthumous award winner. Tom was a 1952 graduate and was extremely active in the community, past president of the Farmers Bank, and many civic activities. Along with one honorary this year was James Moyer. Jim was a teacher for 37 years and was active at the high school. And then in addition, we have Mike Kelly, who's a retired teacher, was a graduate of 1966. Michelle Miller Gunyon, a graduate of 1979. And Bertie Gunyon Meyer, graduate of 1971.
Okay, thanks. If you want to hand your microphone over to Craig, I want to ask him a couple of questions. Craig is the guy who came up with the idea of, in order to have money to be able to run the Hall of Fame, he had the idea several years ago of starting a golf scramble for alumni. And which one was this? 3rd?
This was number 4.
4. How'd it go yesterday?
Went very well. I always say when you have a golf outing, you need 3 things. You need great weather, great sponsors, and great helpers. And we had all 3 of those. We hit the trifecta yesterday, so we had a fantastic day.
And the money that you get from the golf scramble, how is that used for the Hall of Fame?
Well, initially, when the Hall of Fame started in our first year, of course, funding was a major obstacle at first. We had a couple of companies, Farmers Bank, Goodwin Funeral Home, that really helped us get off the ground because, you have to print programs, you have to send out a lot of mailings, make the plaques. There's just a lot of expenses you don't think about. And then actually, I wasn't the one that thought of the golf scramble. It was Coach John Milholland. One day we had a meeting and he said, we're always thinking about how we could maybe raise some funds. And he goes, I think we ought to have a golf outing and you're in charge. But yeah, so we worked on that, and it's helped fund the not only the Hall of Fame, but also some projects, some classes that the schools need as well.
Okay. Is there going to be a 5th annual golf event next year, Craig?
Well, we certainly, looks like we will have. Put me on the spot. But everybody had a great time yesterday, and they enjoy coming back, meeting friends, and old teachers, acquaintances, and we have a reception that's after the golf. We recognize our new Hall of Fame recipients as well as the ones that come back, and have prizes, a cookout, and had a perfect day for it. So I think everybody enjoys it and looks forward to the next one.
I know I've heard people refer to it as a kind of class reunion for all classes.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I just had my 50th year class reunion last year, so I know the work it takes to get everybody organized for one of those, but this one, the word just kind of gets out, and they come back to meet their old friends, and they don't really need a invitation for it. And many times, as Don mentioned, the new Hall of Famers, they have classmates that want to come back and support them as well. So it works out pretty good, and we have the regulars that show up every year for the golf outing, but then we always have some new ones that give it a go.
I know I was surprised last night to see several teachers that I had in high school. So that was a long time ago, so that's quite an effort for them to get here.
Yes, there was one foursome, and their average age was 84, and they played very well. They beat a lot of groups, so they still have game.
Thanks, Craig. Now that you know a little bit about the Hall of Fame, and if you have any questions, you can sure ask later. We'll turn our attention to 2 of the newest members of the Hot Dog Hall of Fame. I'm going to talk with Jodi first, because Jodi went to IU, and Travis did not go to IU. Jodi Skiles Commins is a 1997 graduate of Frankfort High School, a graduate of Indiana University, and a graduate of the Indiana University School of Medicine. She is presently a pediatric hematologist oncologist at Riley Hospital for Children. She has been honored with the Trustee Teaching Award, the Riley Hospital for Children Red Shoes Award, the Healthcare Heroes Award. Please welcome Jodi Skiles Commins.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you have a good speech all written, or are you just going to make it up as you go?
Well, somewhere in between.
Oh.
I have talking points. We call them stepping stones in medicine, which are kind of pivotal points that kind of led me to where I'm at now. So.
Okay, good. How long is it? Did you practice it?
No.
Oh. See, as a former speech teacher, that's a big mistake.
I know. Mr. Henderson would be so disappointed.
He would be. We should probably call him and have him grade you.
It's not too late. I have a little bit of time.
In 3 words or less, what does a pediatric hematologist oncologist do?
3 words.
You can have more words.
I can have more words. Okay, that's good. I treat children who have the hardest to treat cancers. So cancers that don't respond to standard chemotherapy and need a bone marrow transplant.
So the children that you work with have tried the normal things, and they need more.
Yes, they need non-traditional therapies.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of your specialty then, non-traditional therapies, like what?
So stem cell transplant harnesses the power of the immune system, but specifically you're taking the immune system from another person that's a match to that patient and giving them a new cancer surveillance system. So we use that in combination with really high doses of chemotherapy and radiation to try to give them a new immune system that hopefully won't let the cancer come back.
And does that sometimes work and sometimes not, or?
Yeah, it's, I would say on average, our overall survival rate is somewhere in the range of 70%, which when you're dealing with patients who have already failed everything else, that's not too shabby.
No, that seems great. You kind of already did this. I don't know whether to skip this question or whether you have more to say. I was going to, when I read that your focus was in stem cell transplant, immune-based therapies, that's sort of what you just explained, wasn't it?
Mostly, there is another half
I
to
actually
it.
said on here, explain it to me like I'm 3 years old.
Like you're 3, okay. Well, I'll tell you what I tell my patients, which is, so there's stem cell transplant, which I just explained to you, but I think probably the coolest thing that I get to participate in is a new therapy called CAR T-cell therapy, or it's a type of gene therapy. And really what we do is we take white blood cells or lymphocytes from the patient, we take them out of their body, and we supercharge them into what I refer to as ninja cells that are specifically trained how to fight that patient's cancer. Oh, wow. So we genetically modify the cells, and then we give them a little bit of chemotherapy, just a little bit, and then we infuse those cells back in, and those cells go to work fighting cancer. And it's really their own immune system, just in a supercharged fashion.
Could you tell us, you're at Riley Hospital for Children, could you tell us a little bit about what your daily life is like when you go in there? I mean, that must be very rewarding and at the same time challenging in other ways working with young people.
Yeah, my day varies a lot from week to week and day to day, depending upon whether I'm on service or in clinic. But for the patient-facing portion of my job, I do patient care roughly 40% of the time. And on the days that I am on service, that's taking care of the patients that are in the hospital, going to see them every day and make new decisions based on new data that comes in, and then supporting them until they are recovered from their stem cell transplant. I'm on call, when I'm on service, I'm on call for 7 days at a stretch, 24 hours a day. But I get to sleep in my own bed at night. I only have to go into the hospital if somebody's really sick, which is nice. And then when I'm in clinic, it's just like any other doctor that's in clinic. I see the kids that have, typically it's kids that have already had their transplant and are now just in follow-up but still really sick. So they come to clinic twice a week, every week for months on end, and we support them through that phase.
Do you, with what you do, is a lot of your work consulting with other doctors about treatment for kids?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the things that I love the most about my job is pediatric oncology is a really tiny community, and one thing that's so nice about it is I never feel like I'm on an island by myself. The hardest cases, the most challenging scenarios, if I send an email or pick up the phone, whether it's to my own colleagues at Riley or national or even global experts, people are super responsive because they know that there's a child in need on the other end of that phone call. And it's just really refreshing for me to be able to say to a family, you know, we're in deep weeds, but I've talked to everybody, and this is the input that I've heard back. And I think that brings a lot of comfort to people.
Let's go back a few years. What are some of your memories of high school at Frankfort High School? And were you always a good student, or were you a late bloomer?
We could ask Mrs. Wilson what she thinks about that question. So in high school, I always was, I don't know what caused me to be this way, but I was kind of the quintessential type A, always wanted to do my best. My parents, who are amazing, were always my biggest cheerleaders. They told me from the time that I could walk that I could do anything I wanted to do, which is, I think many parents would say that to their child, but my parents didn't go to college. I was the first person in my family to go to college, and so when I started saying from the time that I was in kindergarten that I wanted to be a doctor that worked at Riley, they were like, you can do it. Like, they believed in me, and I think that belief is something that kind of allowed me to pursue my dream in a way that maybe not every kid would have the opportunity to do. So I was always a good student, probably too stressed about grades much of the time of my life. And then in high school, I was involved in I was from the time that I was 4, I was a competitive swimmer under Steve Mullen, and I played violin under Janet Priest, and was involved in tennis for 1 season, and had a very bustling social life with all of my amazing friends who I still stay in touch with today. We affectionately refer to ourselves as Frankfort's finest. We gather about every year or so to see each other from all over the country.
Well, now that you're in the Hall of Fame, you can be the finest of Frankfort.
That's right.
Finest.
That's right.
And they can't argue with that.
That's right.
Okay, good. What's the best part about being a doctor? What's the worst part?
That's easy. The best part of being a doctor, I tell people always say to me, like, how do you do your job? That must be so sad. And I say, I think God gifts us all uniquely, but I love my job. And I feel so lucky to get to say that, because I feel like there are a lot of people that don't love their jobs. We spend a lot of time at work, right? And to not love what you do is just such a travesty. But for me, bar none, the relationships that I get to have with my patients are my favorite part of what I do. I always tell families when I meet them that I know that you never wanted to meet me. Needing to know a pediatric oncologist, and especially a transplanter, is nothing that anybody ever wants. But I always tell them, I said, I know you don't believe this right now, but by the time we're done with this, I will be an extension of your family. And I think if you surveyed my patients, they would tell you that that's very true. I mean, they become, great friends, not just of me, but even of my husband and my kids. And, one of my patients, their mom is our family photographer, right? I mean, it's just, you spend such intimate moments together that it's impossible not to develop really close relationships. And that's probably what I love the most about my job. What I like the least about my job, obviously, is when we are not successful. It is so hard to have to say to a mom and a dad, I don't have anything else curative to offer your child. And knowing where to draw the line and say, there are things that I can do to you, but they are not necessarily things that I can do for you. And knowing when to say, we need to transition our goals of care to quality of life instead of quantity of life. Those are always hard conversations, but I think even in that, it is such a privilege to get to walk with families through that crisis. And, I am a Christian, and I think the opportunity to share my faith and point people to hope is, like, the job that I have allows me to do that in a way that I think is really rare in society in general, but especially in medicine. So,
awesome. Well, you kind of led me to my last question for you. Tell me a little bit. I don't know if you remember your family, if you're at work 7 days straight, but if you can remember, tell us a little bit about your family.
Yeah, so I have an amazing husband. His name is Phil Commins, and we met my final year of training. We always joke because when we were first getting to know each other, he asked me, okay, so tell me again how many years of school. And I would tell him, like, this many years of medical school, residency, fellowship, master's degree, like all this. He's like, no, how many years? I said, I'm in the 27th grade. And he was like, okay, that I can follow. And so we met when I was in the 27th grade was when we met. And our dating and courtship was pretty short. And I always say, everybody needs a Phil. He is just the light of my life. He is such an amazing encouragement and support for me and for my girls and for the rest of my family. He is everybody's helper. He never hesitates to come when needed for anything, and I really mean that. I could not do what I do without him. His job is unique. He has backed off a little bit in his job to allow me to carry more weight in my job, which means he carries more of his fair share on the home front, which is such an amazing blessing for me. He is the family chef. I don't cook. I rarely go to the grocery store. I mow the yard. He does the cooking. It's amazing. I have 2 little girls, Molly and Gracie. Molly is 10. Gracie is 7. They are just such delightful kids, and I'm so privileged to be their mom. I feel like it's so funny because before I was a mom, I was a pediatrician, and giving general pediatrics advice to parents when I didn't have a child of my own. And then I had my own children, and I think back to some of the terrible advice I gave to people. And I always say, having children actually made me a much better pediatrician because it helped me to have insight into things that I couldn't have known any other way. And they are just an absolute delight to get to watch grow up. They actually, in fact, not this summer, but last summer, they participated in Annie Jr. They were orphans in Annie Jr. that was performed on the stage. So it was a real treat to come back and have them be back in my hometown and under the guidance of Julie Doan, who is one of my classmates. It was so special. So they've been just a treasure.
Well, thanks so much. And again, if you have any questions, you can ask at the end. Our next honoree did not attend Indiana University. Travis Kelley was salutatorian of the FHS Class of 1991 and then spent the next 4 years at Purdue University, graduating with a degree in aviation technology. Commissioned into the Marine Corps as a second lieutenant, he graduated first in his flight school class, earning his Naval Aviator wings. For the next 22 years, Travis served as a fighter pilot in various Marine FA-18 Hornet squadrons, flying over 150 combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan, earning 7 Air Medals and a Navy Commendation Medal with Valor. He can now add Hot Dog Hall of Famer to that list. Welcome, Travis.
Thank you. Thanks.
First of all, thank you for your service to our country.
Oh, thank you.
And sorry about the Purdue joke. That was all Jodi's idea.
That's fine. I think your 3 words should be, I save children's lives. I mean,
Yeah.
the 4 words there.
Yeah,
I mean,
4
that's
would
remarkable.
do it. Well, I'm not going to ask you what the worst part about flying a jet is, but I will ask you, what's the best part about flying a jet?
I loved it from the day that I was a little kid. I mean, not quite as far as kindergarten, but probably around the 6th grade. I still remember I saw an ad for the Air Force. It was an Aim High slogan with 4 T-38s inverted, flying, a picture of them inverted. And that struck a chord with me, and I'm like, that's what I want to do. And then the movie Top Gun came out when I was an impressionable teenager in 1986, and it was all over after that. So the most enjoyable part of flying, I just came back from Oshkosh with my daughter. We flew our T-28, which is an old 1957 Navy trainer, up to Oshkosh, which is this huge air show up in the middle of Wisconsin. And we got to watch the modern 5th generation fighters do demonstrations, and it really just, I can't watch it without getting a tear. And I put myself right back in that seat, and I just loved it. I mean, the thrill of maneuvering an aircraft in that manner, the freedom that it gives you, the trust that your nation gives you in handing a 24-year-old kid the keys to a $40 million jet. It was just an experience of a lifetime, and I cherish it. It's hard not to get excited about it when I watch a demonstration like that. I'll talk about it tonight too, but I find myself physiologically doing things when I see the jet coming towards show center, and he's about to go into an 8G turn. I start to instinctively tighten the muscles in my legs, in my butt, and in my core to push the blood up in my head to get ready for that turn, because it's going to hurt. And it just, I loved it. It's a joy of flying. And to this day, I mean, my hobby is owning and operating a 1957 Carrier trainer, and it's what I do. I like it.
I was going to ask you about that at the end, but since you're talking about it, what is this trainer isn't a jet, is it?
No, it's the last piston engine trainer that the Navy had, and this specific variant was designed to train carrier landings on the carrier, specifically the USS Lexington. So I got it from this gentleman who was a warbird collector. He passed away. I got it from his family about 5 years ago, and it's a work of passion. It's the neediest machine I've ever known, but it's really fun. So I enjoy it.
I think only a pilot would enjoy going up in a machine that's needy. I don't want to go up in a needy machine.
No, it needs
Yeah.
it needs a lot.
You flew 150 combat missions as a pilot. Now you can go into as much or little detail as you want, but a combat mission, is that mainly to attack ground targets, or is it support for ground troops?
Yeah, it could be both, and it's hard to define. 150 is a rough number, and I mean it was several hundred combat hours. A lot of times we would fly a mission, get gas, and then fly another mission. So is that 2 missions or 1 mission? But yeah, it was a lot of time in the air. I mean, I joined the Marine Corps, right after college in 1995, and then 9/11 happened, and I mean, I knew when 9/11 happened, we were spending the rest of my career, at war. So, the 100 and the missions, oftentimes in support of troops on the ground. We always train for the air-to-air mission. That's the fun mission to train for. I never experienced that. The traditional dogfight, I never even came close to that.
Yeah.
But that's where we spend a whole lot of our time training because it's the most fun. But a lot of it, all the stuff in Iraq and Afghanistan was air to ground. I flew in Iraq in 2003. The first night we were positioned in the Gulf, and flew the night of shock and awe. And went into downtown Baghdad that night with 3 2,000-pound GPS-guided weapons, and that was to make way for the troops to come in, kind of to gain air superiority, make way for the troops to come in and be unimpeded as much as possible. And then by the time we got to Afghanistan, it had changed to really completely close air support. Supporting Marines that were on the ground. So, you can look back and say, were the wars just or right? And, my opinion of those have changed drastically over the years. But I know that, at that time in Afghanistan, summer of 2010, we had the most troops we've ever had. There was our troop surge on the ground in Afghanistan, and we did the best we could to support the Marines, mostly Marines on the ground. They were your friends, kids that you knew, and so you did everything you could to help them out.
You flew an airplane, a jet airplane called an FA-18 Hornet. I learned 2 things about this aircraft. First, FA stands for fighter attack.
Yep.
And also, and I knew Mindy would be thrilled about this was also the aircraft the Blue Angels flew until just recently.
They still fly it. They just fly the Super Hornet version, so the E and F model. Yep.
Well, did you fly this aircraft, the FA? Why do I want to call it the F-18? Was it called that?
Yeah, the F-18.
Oh, okay.
The Hornet.
Did you fly that one aircraft your whole life?
Yeah, that
whole
type.
Career?
There were 4 variants: the A, B, C, and D. I flew all 4. Mainly the C, which was a single seat fighter. But yeah, that was pretty much my entire career was flying the F-18. They've transitioned now to the F-35, which is what Claire and I got to see in Oshkosh a lot, which is now what they call a 5th generation fighter. And I had left the Marine Corps right as that transition was happening, so I never experienced that. So.
Did you think about sticking around for 5 more years?
I would have liked to, yeah. Life happens, things happen, and I would have liked to have done that, but it wasn't in the cards for me. But the F-18 was remarkable, a remarkable airplane.
There must have been, during the course of your career, there must have been some pretty amazing advances in technology.
Yeah.
From you began in 1995 until
Absolutely.
what, 10 years ago?
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I shudder to even think about what the F-35 can do. That's all top secret stuff that I'm not read into, and I have no idea. I can guess, but I have no idea what they're actually able to do. But yeah, from a technology avionics standpoint, there's been huge advances in that technology. The airframe itself, the maneuverability of the airframe, its speed, the G's, that's pretty much the same. You know, it's the human body can only withstand about 7 to 9 G's, and guess what they build the plane to? You know, 7 to 9 G's. It doesn't make any sense to engineer a 12G airplane if it's going to put the pilot to sleep. So, so the airframe itself, from a maneuverability standpoint, is really similar, but the technological advances in the avionics is remarkable. The time that I was there, you know, going into Iraq the first time in the late 90s, early 2000, you know, you couldn't really tell the difference between a Toyota pickup truck and a tank with the targeting systems that we had. By the time we were in Afghanistan in 2010, you could tell the difference between me and, say, a guy that was 40 pounds heavier than me. You know, you could tell the difference between, combatants that were enemy or, you know, a straight up civilian. So the technology was remarkable from that standpoint.
You made more than 300 landings on aircraft carriers. Whenever I read something about a plane landing on a carrier, they always use the word postage stamp.
Yeah.
It looks like a postage stamp down there. Can you speak to the difficulties of landing on a carrier versus landing on an airfield?
Yeah, well, so the carrier is moving, which is always a challenge. It's extremely small. It's about a 4.5 acre, 5 acre carrier deck, but most of that's used up by parking airplanes. So the landing area is really small, and there's 4 wires that you're trying to catch. They usually target the 3 wire, which is the third one in. If you were to, say, catch the 1 wire, that means you were probably low on that approach, which is dangerous because you could hit the back of the ship. If you catch the 4 wire, then you were probably high and you barely caught any wires. So they generally target the 3. So it's, you know, the ship is always moving away from you, or there's a natural wind across the deck, so you have to continually adjust for that. A lot of times the deck is pitching. There were several times, one of them in particular, south of Australia, between Australia and Tasmania, they call that the Southern Bight. It's kind of like our North Atlantic. It's a treacherous ocean. And we had come out of port in Sydney, and we were making our way around to the west coast of Australia, and we needed to fly at night to get current, and the sea state was terrible. And I remember going out during the day, and I'm like, there's no way we're going to fly tonight. And I had the old camcorders, right? You know, the camcorder cameras that you put on your shoulder. And I remember, you know, taking pictures of the ocean as the deck came down, and then you'd see the sky as the deck came up. And but they launched us. They launched us that night to get current, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. You know, extremely difficult to come out of that low ceiling cloud deck at night, and then to see this massive piece of iron that's just heaving and moving, and you're trying to land at 175, 180 miles an hour in the dark. So it's the greatest thrill in aviation. I do think it's also the greatest challenge. I loved it. I loved the process of it. I studied it. I worked hard at it. And as a Marine on a Navy carrier, it was always fun to, you know, do your best against the Navy guys and see if you could beat them with your landing grades. Every landing is graded. It's graded, and then, you know, if you're a good student of your landing, you're going to study that landing, review your tapes, review everything that you did on that approach, learn from it so that you can get better on the next pass. And so I loved it. It was great. The daytime stuff was fantastic. The nighttime stuff was always, it's terrifying, but in a good way, if that makes sense.
What if you miss the 4th one?
If you miss the 4th one, no matter what, when you land, you immediately go to full power.
Oh.
And so if you were to miss the wires, they call that a bolter. The LSOs will say bolter, 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 and you just go around, and you're fine. You just go around, try it again. So if you catch the wire, when you catch the wire, you're in full power. And, you know, then you come out of the wires, you come back on the power. But you're not allowed to come back in the power until they retract you and they know.
Is that a frequent or infrequent occurrence?
When you're younger, inexperienced, it's frequent. On my last deployment, I'd had very few bolters, and I've got other stories about, you know, how your landing grades, you know, can go from good to bad, back to good, and, you know, all kinds of stuff like that. But generally speaking, it doesn't happen a whole lot. But yeah, it does. It's really not that big a deal. The one wire is what there's, when you start hitting the one wire and you start flying low approaches, that's when they're really gonna, hey, what, you know, let's correct that, let's fix it.
Before you retired, you were named Commanding Officer of Marine Fighter Attack Squadron 232.
Yep.
Why was that a special honor for you?
Well, I think, you know, being a commanding officer, that's what I always that was my goal. I wanted to be commanding officer of a fighter squadron, and to have that honor of getting to serve in that capacity. I had, you know, about 230, we used to say 232 because it's the same in the squadron, but at various times, you know, 230 Marines and sailors that I was in charge of, and 12 jets that you were responsible for, and responsible for their well-being, their development, and their growth. And it was the thrill of a lifetime. It was the experience of a lifetime. I had a great squadron. VMFA 232 is the oldest Marine Fighter Attack Squadron in the Marine Corps, and I had a great tour. I had remarkable department heads. So I was the lieutenant colonel, I was the CO, but I had a major as an XO who was remarkable, and then an outstanding operations officer and maintenance officer. And then we had a whole bunch of young guys underneath us that were they're just stellar. I mean, absolutely incredible individuals that, you know, the intelligence and the ability of these young first lieutenants and captains, it was just fun to watch. And then all the Marines that were working on the jets, you had Ordnance Marines, Power Plant Marines, Avionics Marines. I mean, their professionalism and their abilities were, to get to lead them, I mean, it was just an honor of a lifetime. And I really enjoyed it. It went really well. It was a great tour. So, and I had great support. My wife at home, you know, she was what they call the CO's wife, and, you know, the families relied on her when we deployed to help with the things that were going wrong at home. And, you know, having that support, I wouldn't have had the success I had without her doing that while I was deployed overseas. So it was pretty cool.
I think I'm going to stop there. I think Travis's mic is going out a little bit.
It's okay. I don't need to be on YouTube.
But
I think your forward should be I defend our country.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
you guys are great. I'm going to go back to you two for one last question. Could you talk just for a minute about how you can tell the audience how they can nominate a deserving alumnus to the Hall of Fame?
You can go out, obviously pick up the little pamphlet that we have here that's got a QR code that will send you right to a form. Or you can go to the Frankfort Education website, and on it, click on Hall of Fame. And when you click on Hall of Fame, there will be a nomination form that can be completed, and it would be forwarded on to the school system, and it will get back to the Hall of Fame board and go into our portfolio of prospective candidates for future years.
Okay, thanks. At this point now, I need to open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions, don't feel bad if you don't, but it'd be nice if you did. But now remember, if you do have a question, raise your hand, and this is my favorite part. Mindy will come flying like the Blue Angels over these chairs to get you a microphone. Any questions from anyone? Right down front.
Well, I wondered if you ran along.
Oh, okay. That's Mindy. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you both so much. I just, sitting here,
if you're sick, you don't go in. But outside of the patient having an infection that could be at risk to other children on the unit, we don't put them in any sort of isolation except for their room, and the entire unit is HEPA filtered to keep out particular fungal infections that are in the air.
What's the youngest infant you've had to work with?
So babies that are born without an immune system, that condition is called SCID, or many people know it as bubble boy syndrome. Those patients, the goal is to have them starting their transplant by 3 months of age, which that makes for a really busy 3 months because you have to identify a donor, prep the patient, clear the patient. So there's a lot that goes into those 3 months. We pride ourselves, we give ourselves a pat on the back if we can make it by 2 months. And that's increasingly made possible because now we have newborn screening that kind of alerts us from the get-go. You don't have to wait for the patient to get sick to figure out something's wrong. The screening tells us that they are born without an immune system and they need an immune system immediately.
And one question for you, Travis. Every time you did a mission, was it exciting and thrilling and scary?
I mean, some of them, nothing happened, and it was, kind of boring. But always flying, coming back to the ship was exciting and thrilling. So, and some of the missions were, I mean, quite frankly, they're terrible. I mean, they're just not good. But that's what you do. I always enjoyed the flying part of it, and I still do. And again, it goes back to, like, there's a scene in Top Gun, the new Top Gun, and it shows it's a great view of the carrier out in the ocean. It kind of panoramic, probably a drone is taking this incredible footage of it, and when I see it, it's like, it gives you goosebumps, and I want to go back, and a lot of people hated being on the carrier, and, I loved it because it boiled life down to, I sleep, I get up, I work out, I go fly, and then I repeat it and do it again, and it makes life very, very simple. So yeah, I had a great experience with it, and I enjoyed it. So.
That was 3 questions, but we won't charge you extra. Anyone else? Mr. Eric Spencer has a question.
For Travis, how far away from the targets were you? I mean, how long did it take you to get to, in Afghanistan in particular?
Well, so in Iraq, I'll put it, so in Iraq, we were on the carrier, and the USS Constellation, I did 2 deployments on that ship, and the ship always moved within the Gulf, and then back at the kickoff in 2003 when the war started, there were actually 3 carriers in the Gulf, all maneuvering at the same time, and a carrier, it drags an entire chunk of airspace around with it that has to be coordinated. So the ship was always in a different spot, but the transit times, it just depended. If you were going to Baghdad, which was kind of primarily where we went early on, it's about an hour trip up, so you'd transit up about an hour, so at 480 miles an hour, it's 480 miles, and you'd get gas before your mission, you'd fly your mission, you'd get gas to maybe fly another mission or get gas to go back to the ship, because you always wanted to come back to the ship with plenty of gas to make sure you can get aboard. So that was Iraq. Now Afghanistan, it's landlocked, and there's, if you're going to be out on a ship, you're really pretty far out at sea. So you're looking at a 2-hour transit up along the Pakistan border, up through Pakistan to get to Afghanistan. And when the Marine Corps put all our troops in Afghanistan in 2010, when we surged the troops, we kind of worked out a deal with the Navy that we would take my squadron, we would not go on the USS Nimitz, and we would be land-based in Kandahar in southern Helmand province. So we flew our missions out of Kandahar, so we were not on the ship in that deployment, but we were 5 minutes away from Marines. And literally we would launch, and then Marines were in contact with enemy, we were there within minutes. And we flew an incredible amount of sorties because we were so close to the Marines that were right there in southern Helmand province.
Any other questions?
You both are obviously accomplished students. Was there one area of study that you really had difficulty with for both of you?
Organic chemistry was my nemesis. That and biochem were both really challenging. It's funny because when I was going through high school, like Mr. Ball, Greg Ball and Mr. Verbrugge were my math and science teachers, and it was not easy. I mean, I had a natural giftedness for math, but like the sciences were interesting, but I had to invest more energy into that. But it was so fun, and I think it was because my teachers made it fun. I mean, we had so much fun in those classes, even though we worked really hard. And then I went to college, and I didn't have teachers that made it fun anymore. And so that part was a little bit of an adjustment. And when I was in college, I actually majored in math. Little known fact, at most schools you can't actually major in pre-medicine, because then if you don't get into medical school, what are you supposed to do with that? So you have to pick something else. And I thought, well, I don't like the sciences enough to major in it. So I majored in math, which made a lot of sense at the time. In hindsight, that probably wasn't the best decision, because when I went to medical school, I had a really hard uphill path to climb in my first semester of medical school, because it was review for people who were in the sciences in college. I mean, I had math, I had sciences in college, but not to the same extent that people that majored in that area. So that was probably my hardest thing.
I did not major in math. It's surprisingly so. I was aviation technology at Purdue, and I mean, honestly, it's a really easy major. Your classes are flying, so if you love flying, you're probably going to do okay. And you have a basic, basic math courses, a basic physics course, a lot of meteorology courses. None of them were really that difficult. So I didn't really have, I didn't challenge myself academically like Jodi did. I didn't have those tough courses. Later, as I went further in my career, I found my weaknesses were technology-driven weaknesses when it came down to programming a weapon system, those types of things where you had to really sit down with a computer with a database and go through those steps of programming. That was always a challenge for me because I didn't really have the background. I learned it, but it was a challenge.
I have one more question.
Yep.
Is somebody? Oh,
Yeah, I
Eric,
have
sorry.
one more.
Yeah.
Travis, you talked about landings, which just sound terrifying to me. But what about the takeoff? It just,
Oh man,
it's got to be exhilarating, I would think.
Well, the whole thing, a daytime flight at the ship is really the most fun you can have in aviation. It is the most fun. I'll be mentioning this tonight, but it was mentioned earlier. You loved your job, and if you love your job, success is going to follow, and it's going to be relatively easy. I don't feel like I worked that hard because I just loved doing it, but I would have trouble sleeping at night. The schedule would come out in the evening, and you'd see yourself on the schedule, and you're going to go fight an F-14. You're going to meet north of the ship at 50 miles at 18,000 feet at this time, and you're going to fight this guy in a Navy squadron. So you show up, and you get out there, and you have your dogfight with an F-14, and then you come back to the ship, and you land on the ship during the day. I would have trouble sleeping at night because I could not wait for that event to happen in the morning. And then you'd spend the next 2 days potentially debriefing that event. Every part of that, every turn, every maneuver, every minute detail of that event, you would spend the time to learn. And the daytime launching off of the carrier, it's the greatest thrill in aviation. I mean, you would laugh every single time when you feel that catapult stroke, you hit the end, there's a gunk when you hit the end, and I would laugh. I would giggle every single time because it is awesome. It was really awesome. Uh-oh.
Well, that's not good.
As impressed as I am with Travis, and I love hearing his stories, you know that, Travis, but Jodi, I teared up listening to you talk because you're so impressive, and your story just, as a mom, just gives me chills. But anyway, thank you for all that you do, especially at Riley. We love Riley. We support Riley. It's an amazing hospital. But how did you choose your specialty? You said you wanted to be a doctor as a 5-year-old or kindergartner. I mean, like, my kids, I don't expect them to know what they want to do. I mean, I think they both have like little ideas, but what's your story in choosing that?
I'll talk a little bit about this tonight, but it was not, I always knew that I wanted to be in medicine, and I always knew that I wanted to work with kids. Those were the kind of guiding North Stars of my journey, but there were definitely weaves along the way, back and forth. I knew that I wanted to go into medicine to help people. Mrs. Moore was my kindergarten teacher, and we had career day. And as part of career day, they invited a parent in that I think the person that came in was probably, in hindsight, like looking back, I think it was probably a surgical scrub tech. They came up all gowned in, and their sterile equipment, and their gowns, and their caps, and their masks. And I remember them talking about helping people, and I thought, well, I want to help people, right? And so that was kind of where the dream was born. And so that's when I set my sights on being a doctor. And I knew that I loved kids. I had always loved kids, even though I was only a kid. I loved babies. And so when I was in kindergarten, I thought that I wanted to be an OBGYN until I found out what GYN stood for, and then I was out. So I will say that delivering babies is really fun. It is part of my training that I went through in medical school, and there is no thrill like bringing a new life into this world and sharing that moment with the family. But once the baby was out and I handed it off to the pediatrician team to go to the warmer, I wanted to follow the baby, not stay with the mama. That was my key. The OBGYN was not for me. So then I thought, well, okay, I really like babies. Maybe I want to do NICU. And so then in my residency rotations, we have to spend time in the newborn ICU, which is, in my head, I had very much fantasized about like rocking babies and cuddling them and how amazing that would be to be able to doctor them and cuddle them. What they don't tell you is that you're not allowed to touch the babies at all when they're in the ICU. So you don't actually get to interact in that way, and you don't really even interact with the parents that much in the NICU. It's very standardized kind of don't tell them I said this, but kind of cookbook medicine. There's not a lot of like independent decision making. And then I did my first rotation in pediatric oncology, and I think there are so many things about it that I love, but I think the thing that I really fell in love with was the opportunity to be in relationship with families over a long period of time, but with kids that were sick and in crisis. Because like pediatricians develop long-term relationships, but mostly children are well. And I really like the academic challenge of delving into when they're sick, like kind of leaning into that. And it's really cool to get to watch a patient go from like literally on their deathbed to like thriving and being back in school. And to get to know the family over the duration of what is oftentimes years. One of my most cherished patients, we jokingly refer to him as my firstborn son. I don't have any sons, but he feels like my firstborn son because I met him before I met my husband, and he is still in active treatment. I've been married to my husband for 12 years, and he's been in treatment for 14. And so like, you really are in the trenches with these families, and his mom is the one that is our family photographer, right? Like, there is nothing as precious as being able to be in the trenches with the family when they're in crisis. And, I am very clear with families that, like, I don't control the outcome, but I will use all the tools in my toolbox to try to help your child get better. And to get to, like, experience that journey is, it's like a drug, honestly. Like, you get kind of hooked on being able to walk alongside a family. And specifically, the part that I think is so cherishing about that is that there is nothing like learning not to sweat the small stuff when you have that perspective lived out in front of you every day, right? Like, I'm not saying that I do it perfectly, but things that I might have gotten spun up about as a mom without this job are very different, right? And so when I have a bad day at work, when we lose a kid, when something is really hard, like, I lean in at home by hugging my kids and appreciating what I may not have appreciated, like the fact that they get to be out and play in the dirt, right? Like that is not something that my patients get to do. And so when they come home dirty, instead of being frustrated with like, oh, I gotta give you another bath tonight, right? Like I get to give them a bath tonight, and I get to lean in that way. And I think it makes me a better mom, and I think it makes me a better doctor.
I think we'll wrap it up. We've gotten to about that hour point that I promised you. The 2024 Hot Dog Hall of Fame induction ceremony will take place at 4 o'clock this afternoon in the cafeteria at the high school. Admission is free, so come on out. Hear more about the lives and experiences of all our inductees. Thanks to Don and Craig for showing up today, and especially Travis and Jodi. I think you can see why they were nominated. Hoosier Storytellers will return on October 17th with a look back at James Osler's Frankfort photos from the early 1960s, along with our special guests Bill Miller, Dennis Hoffman, and Flossie Swearingen. Thanks to my Hoosier Storytellers partners in crime, Mindy Emsweiler, Daniel Robertson, and thanks to those of you who chose to skip the Diving Dogs exhibition and spend an hour with us instead. Hoosier Storytellers is a presentation of the Frankfort Community Public Library.